Hello and welcome to the aForm show. My name is Alan George and thank you very much for tuning in. Each week, we sit across from thought leaders and change makers in the architecture and design space of the GCC. We dive deep into their experiences, both professionally and personally, and share their valuable insight as to what makes them tick. Our goal is to add value to your day and help you navigate your own personal creative journey. Finally, the opinions and the views of the guest speakers are that of their own. They do not necessarily represent the views and the opinions of the show or the host. Welcome to the show, everyone. This week, we are joined by a familiar face, a familiar voice. If you have been a long-time listener or probably one of the first ever listeners of the show, you will recognize her. I'm talking about none other than Hana Younes from Dabbagh Architects.
Hello. Good morning.
Welcome to the show, Hana.
Hi. How are you? This is
right.
very strange.
So let's give a bit of context as to where we are at mentally. Yes. So Hana herself is just coming out of a major submission. Yes. I myself am coming out of, well, let's just say a lot of hectic work. So if we do seem a bit floozy and a bit off this episode, please forgive us.
Yes. Thank you. I'm happy at least that my voice is working today.
Okay. So now down to business. Off air, we were talking about obviously the kind of projects we're working on, suppliers and so on. And there was a interesting topic that came up. And I think maybe we should start there because that's something which designers tend to deal with, but don't necessarily talk about.
Yes.
The topic is, drum roll, value engineering.
Yes.
There you go. Value engineering. The two words which any designer hears and says, dear God, why?
It's one of our least favorite things.
So now, I've been involved in a few projects where value engineering has actually helped or actually been done correct in the sense that it's never trying to reduce or take away from, but more trying to find substitutes or other kind of treatments or solutions to still maintain the same design vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key difference between value engineering done correctly and done badly. Seeing as to how you've done a bit of work wherein you've dealt with that as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What do you think should be the right way to go about it?
Well, for one thing, I mean, I know I say that I don't like value engineering. Of course, it has a place. It's necessary. We can't always stick to the specifications that we want. I know architects are quite possessive of their design. We like a certain quality. I guess we have a bit of I don't want to say we have expensive taste, but we like really good quality materials, furniture, fittings, everything. We want it to be the best version of itself in our design, which can be understandable. We want to give the client the best that they can get, but obviously we got to work with them. We can't stick to our guns and be stubborn about it. Value engineering has a really important place in the project. And you're right, it can be extremely useful. I mean, it kind of encourages more creativity, you could say. You have to do a workaround. You can't always get exactly what you want. And it's good actually, because it allows you to really stretch your abilities and look for new solutions, it's part of your job. It's your requirement. I mean, the building is not for you. The building is for the client and the users. Not everyone can have a giant budget.
Right.
That would be amazing, but that's not the case. A very small percentage of projects have that, I wouldn't say unlimited budget, but a budget that's so generous that they can really have creative freedom. That's just the reality of it. And that's a good point actually for any students or young professionals that are just entering the workforce. You're gonna come to these roadblocks in design, and it's totally normal. This is something that will happen in almost every project. You're gonna fall in love with a material or a furniture or something. I mean, especially if you're really invested in the output of your design, and it's going to happen. I mean, it's necessary part of the industry. They can't stretch their budgets. So your client isn't an infinite well.
Right. And I think also maybe sometimes it's not even so much about the budget. I think there are many things which clients perhaps don't get clarity on what the long-term benefits are. I mean, a very simple thing, anyone that's done glazing, for example.
Oh, yes.
Right. If you start off with, say, triple insulated glass, that goes down to a double.
Yes.
And from a double, it goes down from, high quality to a medium one to a lower one and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But no one really understands why that was even specced out that way to begin with.
Yes.
And what the sort of long-term operational benefits would be once it's actually done that way. So I think it may just be, while again, I'm a big fan of value engineering myself.
Yes.
Again, when done correctly.
Yes, when done correctly, yes.
I think sometimes it's just a matter of maybe pushing back a bit, but not with the architect's arrogance, if you may, by saying this is what I did and don't change it.
Yeah, which is kind of the stereotype, is that architects are very much like, this is my design and you need to stick to it. Otherwise you're insulting me, kind of. It's really not like that.
Yeah, so I think, not for the most part. I think maybe push back with a sense of rationale for sure.
Yes.
But then also maybe dive deeper into why that decision was made.
Yes.
And I think maybe that might also be something which clients appreciate. Is that something which you've kind of seen with your clientele?
For sure. I mean, I don't think I've worked on a project, and I'm sure you have. It's extremely rare that you work on a project where value engineering is not required. It's always required.
Correct.
Because as you know, I mean, even in the context of COVID, things change, the economy changes, what people are willing to invest is changing. I mean, again, it comes down to money, but also what materials are available. I mean, we saw what happened with the Suez Canal. A lot of things were delayed. The whole delivery system out of that hub was totally disrupted.
Right.
You've got to work with these things. Change is unexpected sometimes. I find that value engineering is a really useful tool, as you say. I mean, it can be disappointing, but it's also very necessary.
Yeah. I think that maybe broadening the topic a bit, like you said, I like how you put it, saying that you always have to work around these kind of obstacles.
Yes.
And I think value engineering is one such obstacle, but there are many in a project. Again, I'm just going to talk out of my experience. I've found that these obstacles tend to invariably, when you work around them well, actually add design value in a sense.
It does. And it also proves how necessary it is to have an architect also.
Yes.
I mean, I remember seeing that there was this question put out, why are architects necessary? I mean, that question always comes around every once in a while, especially now with the new technology. People are now able to do more with technology. And that question always comes back. I mean, they're just wondering why architects are necessary. But this, especially during things like value engineering, is why architects are necessary. And actually, a thread that I lost there when you were talking about the facade and changing the facade, everything in the building is connected to itself when it comes to the environment inside, the internal environment. So yeah, you can change it from triple glazing to double glazing, but then you need to take into account how that affects the internal environment. And that means that somewhere else in the project, you will have to adjust also, because it's linked, especially if you have a very strict requirement for the internal environment, like with a museum, for example. We are working currently on a museum. I think I'm allowed to say that. And they have very stringent conditions when it comes to the preservation of those artifacts and the items that will be displayed in the space. So anything that you change, you need to immediately study how that affects. I mean, this is a very highly specialized example, but you need to be very careful as well. And that's why, again, architects are very important, because we are always mindful of that. We're not going to be like, yeah, sure, let's change it to this. That means the U value is going to change and that will affect the internal environment. And then you don't think about how that affects the rest of the spaces. How do you balance that? Sorry, just to tie back to what you had mentioned.
No,
I just thought it was a very good point.
Because again, I can see that link. You know, the minute you said that, yeah, it'll affect it somewhere else, I'm already thinking, okay, so if it's less insulated glazing, that means there's more heat coming in, there's more light coming in. Light ambience affects the finishes that I have. Probably something overly reflective would blind someone or cause a lot of glare.
Yes.
Inversely, heat gain would mean AC units become a lot bigger.
Yes.
Ducts become a lot bigger. False ceiling heights reduce. That affects your interior.
Yes.
So it's a very knock-on effect.
It really is.
And Hannah just smiled when I said false ceiling heights reduce, because that's yet again something which most designers here struggle with.
Yes. And we very much love the MEPs designers that we work with, but it's always
a bit of friction.
There's always a bit of friction. And then when the second they say, oh, the ceiling level has to change, and you're like, oh no. You're just like, how low are you going? We don't want our users. We don't want our users to limbo themselves through rooms. to fit the units.
True.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, yet another interesting topic about engineering when it comes to architecture.
Yes.
Initially, I used to find it a big pain point for myself because especially when you're in a boutique firm, you don't normally have in-house engineers. So then you normally have to subcontract or bring in, specialists and so on.
Exactly.
Who may or may not share the same visions, ethos, or, to put it simply, they were just not involved from the inception of the project and therefore don't necessarily understand client expectations or what your own expectations are from the project.
Yes.
However, for me personally, I'm starting to see that change the more we work with the same vendors again and again. They sort of get what you do, why you do it, and so on. Like I finally don't have to explain why I'm doing a negative detail here and not doing it there, that kind of thing. Same thing with structure, cantilever slabs and things like that.
Yes.
Is that something which you're also starting to see now?
Oh, yeah, of course. And that's something that you don't realize when you're working in a design studio because it's such an isolated, you're just like in your own little bubble. You have to work with other disciplines to get your design out. And there's always that little point of contention with engineering and of all aspects of engineering. But we're finding it now. We've worked repeatedly with certain sub-consultants or consultants, I could say, because they're fantastic in their own right. The one that we're working with currently has some amazing projects under their belt. They're very experienced. I mean, it really also depends on who you're working with. The ones we're working with right now, we're very fortunate that they have this wealth of experience. Yes, you will still butt heads with them. They'll send an email and you'll be like, oh no. And then you have to do a whole coordination meeting again and argue a wee bit very politely.
Yes.
But you do end up coming to a solution, and you're not going to get your way always. I mean, there is some common sense involved. They're not just saying it has to be like that because it has to. They're really playing Twister it's like playing Twister with their design, true. Especially if your design's quite complicated. So you need to take that into account and be quite respectful. Yeah. And it's also a very good experience because you also get a kind of understanding yourself. You learn from each other. I've gained such a much fuller understanding of the engineering and what the limitations are through these interactions with them.
I think that's also an interesting point because the most common question, if at all I get any from young designers, are we just don't know. We don't know what structure should be like. We don't understand what MEP constraints are. In university, we've been in studio. We have basic understandings about how things work, but we know
what shear load is.
We just feel really intimidated when we're in a meeting with, real world contractors and they keep throwing technical jargon at us.
Yes.
It's very difficult to find your own voice and, back it up with experience. So I feel like you might be a right person to answer this question. How does one get that kind of experience?
Through doing. I mean, I very much believe in the practice of learning through doing. I mean, we did the classes. We did the structure classes, which I didn't enjoy very much, but...
Neither did I. You might want to look into that.
But, it all depends. Everyone's preferences are different. Maybe the professor's teaching style is not gelling with you more than someone else. It's always like that. That's always the case. But I genuinely find that working with these consultants, even though people kind of consider the other sub-consultants as like, oh, they're affecting my design. No, they're enhancing it. You need to approach the situation and like, this is my team. They're not something separate from you. They are part of your team. You have to work with them to enhance the project. They're enhancing. You need to think about it in that kind of mindset. Otherwise, you're going to butt heads.
Right.
And you're not going to get anywhere. I've been in meetings where we've argued for 3 hours about HVAC design and we weren't going anywhere. Like it was mostly just kind of arguing about whose fault it is. And that's the worst case situation because nothing is getting done.
Right.
Time, that's such the cliche thing to say, but time is money. Time is wasted when you could be focusing on the design. So, and that was something I very much learned. I think at the time when that happened, I was quite young as well. I mean, it's quite weird saying that I was quite young.
Well, we all were quite young at one point.
We were green. We were very green. I was quite green in that meeting and I didn't know what to do. But even myself in my head, I was like, we're not getting anything done here, butting heads, arguing, pointing the finger. It's better to acknowledge this is a problem and then proceed with how do we fix this?
Yep.
What can we do to fix this?
Yeah, I think that's something which every architect needs to critically learn, to know when to say, it is what it is.
Yes, exactly.
It is what it is, and we need to move forward.
Don't cling to it.
Yeah.
Don't cling.
As much as you want to.
That's more than just an architect thing. That's as a professional also.
Right.
It's a professional mentality that you need to adapt.
True.
Yeah. Don't take things personal either.
Right.
It's not personal.
Okay. Since we're on the topic of, having consultants as part of your team and so on, I'd be interested to know how your relationships have developed and or changed because of the pandemic, because of just project experience and so on with suppliers. Have you found that suppliers have sort of started changing their approach to how they deal with design firms or consultants or anything like that? Or has it continued to be the same?
I think it's pretty much been the same. I mean, we've been doing Zoom meetings instead of in-person meetings.
And how does that work? I mean, do you find that it's better? Is it more time efficient, or do you
it's
still
certainly more time efficient for both of us.
Okay.
But I do miss, because I'm quite a tactile person, I like to see it in person. And I think most everyone prefers to see samples in person, which does happen. I mean, they will deliver the samples eventually, but it is a time saver, because then there's none of this transport. You don't have to worry about the wait and trying to find the place, etc., which is great for them.
Parking is always an issue anyway.
Especially where we're located. Parking is not the best. But yeah, and I guess it makes it also more accessible to suppliers that are not UAE based also, which is great. We had a chat with a supplier who's based in South Africa. So that was fantastic as well. So they don't have to worry about that. We can, which I think is good, actually. I mean, it's a big plus for them, for business, and for us, because we get to connect with more suppliers that, I mean, they don't have a physical presence, but you have access to them.
Right.
So that's really great as well. You get to see a lot more new options, which is great. So Zoom, I'm sure has done very well since the pandemic started.
Oh no, it has. And
not just Zoom, but the other video conferencing programs.
Right. No, definitely. Me personally, I haven't really seen any of our suppliers really take to Zoom very well. They're still kind of old school in that sense, which again, I don't necessarily have a problem with.
No.
What I have seen Zoom kind of reduce dramatic time on is actually Zoom meetings with clients.
Yes.
I mean, for example, the office is doing a little private sort of majlis villa thing.
Yes.
In Saudi. And typically that would then mean, a flight once every 2-3 months with printout boards and in-person meetings, or conversely, have the client fly down here, meet us and so on. And now we can just have, more frequent catch-ups and the client's a bit more involved in the design now, and at the cost of next to nothing.
Yes.
So we found that to be really beneficial for us.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed as well, actually. I think it was more of a thing in the Western world to have this, and we're just kind of coming alive and noticing that this is such a great tool.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, compared to before, I'd rather not go on a 2-hour drive to go.
Absolutely.
With all these printouts and then stressing about the quality of the print and the boards, are they going to get wrecked on the journey? So it's a lot of less stress and inconvenience.
Absolutely.
It's more convenient.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, I really like it. I mean, we do have clients that don't like it. They're still quite traditional in that sense. They like the in-person aspect, the human interaction. We've had a couple of client members voice their dislike of it because they prefer that,
Right.
And I do agree with that. I mean, it's better to make a connection with a person in person, in the flesh.
Yeah.
But this is what you have to facilitate sometimes. You have to just adapt. And for the most part, people have adapted really well.
Yep. No, I agree completely. I think the whole prior to the pandemic, if you had told me that, oh, listen, digitally and online, you can do this, and this, I would be like, yeah, no, that's not. I mean, maybe me myself, yes, but to get vendors, clients, suppliers, guests, all those people on digitally, no, I don't think that's going to work. But I have since been proven wrong quite happily. I have no regrets that I was proven wrong about it. But yeah, absolutely. I think digital is definitely the way, which brings me to another point. Both firms that we work at are firms that use ArchiCAD.
Yes, they are.
quite proudly also, I must say.
Yes.
Again, not a big industry norm for this region.
Really, it's not, no.
Which is quite strange, but we'll get into that maybe on a different podcast, because that's a podcast of its own.
Yes.
But I just want to get your input, and then I'll follow it up with mine.
Okay.
How has the whole ArchiCAD experience been with your firm and your clients? In the sense that, the whole BIMX side of things and all of that, do you find that it actually helps?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, of course, our clients in this region are kind of waking up to the benefits of it. Not that I'm saying that they were behind, but they just weren't aware. And we've had a lot of fun. I mean, we did a really interesting presentation pre-pandemic where we did a virtual BIMX. I forget where it was. There was a location that had one of those VR screens where you have the headset and they have the huge wraparound screen.
I think this was...
it was at the
Dutch consulate.
Danish consulate.
The Danish
consulate.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
They had it. I don't know if they still do it, but they had this kind of VR pod almost, or a room. And we basically projected our BIMX model. And it was so great to see the look on the team's face when they were literally walking through the building. So it's such a nice firsthand view. And it's so beneficial to especially clients that have trouble visualizing a space. It's so much easier for them to see, oh, okay, so if I'm standing here, that's going to be that distance and the ceiling is this high and things like that. And they can make quick judgments on certain design decisions so easily like that. I mean, it is an extra. It's not necessary, but it's a useful tool.
Right.
And we, in the past few years, I just started... I kind of learned through doing coordination through IFC on BIM. So with our current project that we're working on, I've been coordinating with MEP and structure through the exchange of IFC models. So they're 3D models. We are coordinating that way and doing clash detection that way. And it's been so much easier in 3D.
Yeah.
So much easier to do. Even during our own meetings, we open each other's models and we do sections and we fly around the model with everything inserted. And it's so easy then and there to say, okay, this is a problem. This is okay. Might be an issue later. Let's fix it. So I'm really loving that. And it was a learning process for me, but now that I've got the hang of it, I feel like they're appreciating it too. The sub-consultants are appreciating it too. It's really great. But of course, it's not for everyone. Some sub-consultants are still a little bit wary of doing it only because they don't have the experience yet.
Exact same sort of input that I would give.
Yes.
Wherein, let me give a more tangible example. So on this one project that I'm currently working on, insanely massive footprint on a single story villa.
Ooh.
Right. So it's not very complex from a structure point of view, no first floor, no nothing, but just the footprint is so extensive that it just takes time to, kind of get through the entire thing. And the designers that we worked with work in CAD, work in 2D. And then I started actually modeling their, columns and beams and ducts and all of that. And it's only when they started to see the model that I was showing them, they then started questioning things that they themselves were doing because they could now see it in the context of, oh, but that's what's happening with the architecture there. That's what's happening with the ID there. And we don't necessarily need a 600D beam there. We could do with 500.
Yes.
But it makes the design overall just so much more better if we did that.
Totally.
And I think that that's what's missed, that you don't actually see all disciplines in one sort of coherent place.
Yes. Unless you're extremely experienced and you're able to know, okay, that's going to be an issue just from looking at drawings. I mean, I've experienced senior engineering design engineers, senior ones that can look at a plan and be like, and look at our plan and know immediately, okay, these are going to be an issue. That's from the wealth of experience they have.
Right.
And you're not going to have many of those
True.
In a project at once.
Or you probably can't afford many of those either.
Or they're so busy that they can't. which is the case, unfortunately. I mean, they can't just focus everything on your project. Yeah, I really would encourage. I mean, we don't always get this opportunity to work MEP and structure and architecture all in 3D coordinated together. It's been fantastic.
Right.
There's always hiccups, but that's what happens in a learning process. We don't always have that opportunity. I think the mosque that we recently finished.
Yes, yeah. I was kind of saving that for towards the end of the podcast. But yes, let's get into it.
We experienced that with the mosque. I mean, the design, the engineering.
Okay, let me maybe just pause you there. Give the listeners a bit of context as to. No. This is. I mean, this is definitely. How do I build this up without really overhyping it?
Yeah, please don't.
But it's a mosque.
It is a mosque,
which is on Umsakane Street.
Yes.
Which I'm pretty sure, even if you didn't know before this podcast, you've definitely seen this mosque if you've driven by.
It's a looker.
it's a looker, but it's a looker because it actually stands out by not doing much.
Yes.
That's the interesting thing. It's a very simple form, but I think that's why it stands out because there's so much.
I don't know. Would you say there's a purity about it, which is quite necessary? It's quite
absolutely. In the sense that
very relevant because it's a mosque as well.
No, but there's something to be said about in a landscape of sort of amalgamation and chaos and everything to kind of go the other extreme with simple, pure forms, materials. That actually stands out, if that makes sense.
Yes. I mean, you can't say that Dubai isn't when it comes to the design of architecture here, it's all very much like me. Look at this. Look at me. So I guess we kind of flipped it a bit where we stand out because we don't scream our design. And you'll notice it in our portfolio, I'm pretty sure. Our design is kind of quiet, but really nicely done. And it speaks for itself, which is in particular why I love that mosque very much.
Right.
You go there and you just kind of I don't know, for me personally, in my own personal design opinion, that's why I shouldn't say that everyone is exactly the same, but in my own personal design opinion, where I live, the design of the buildings are quiet. So when I stepped foot on the plot of the mosque, I just kind of had this exhale, this is nice. Kind of like, I don't want to be rude, but it's kind of like eye bleach,
Right.
That's quite a jarring phrase to use, but it's kind of, it cleanses your eyes looking at it after, leaving the surroundings that you were in before. You feel very calm, which is the effect that we wanted actually. So it kind of works very well. It works very well for the mosque.
Yeah, I mean, I have yet to enter, but I have parked and walked around.
Good.
And it is exactly that. I must say, though, from a designer point of view, I was quite curious about how a lot of things were put together because I was like, how did that happen?
Insider
and what
info.
Is this? And it was more of that for me, but I definitely got what you guys were trying to do. And it was exactly that.
Yes.
Eye bleach might be a bit too extreme.
Yeah.
But
that's a personal opinion. I mean, some people might hate it, which is totally fine. I mean, everyone's opinion is different. But for me personally, I just really liked it because the context where I live and then going there, it was such a contrast.
Right. Okay. Then I maybe want to then switch gears a bit.
Yes.
And talk about Hana the designer.
Oof.
Over the last, because it's been now 2-3 years since we last spoke. So this is kind of like a catch up to the topics we spoke about last time. So in that time, if there is one project or a milestone which you feel very proud of for any particular reason, could you share that with our listeners?
Personal project or professional project?
Any or both.
I mean, I didn't get much done personally because of the pandemic. It's kind of hard when you are not able to travel or go really anywhere without being fully masked up and sanitized. Yeah, I'd say I'd have to speak then professionally because actually this is quite silly to say, but the work kept me sane because I live by myself and the lockdown as an introvert was great for a week or so. And then
the entire world's like me now.
Yeah, the entire world is like me. I very much enjoyed having that solitude and not having to deal with people very much because I am such an introvert. But the work really kept me focused. I really did miss seeing people after a while. You need that human interaction. So I was quite happy when the lockdown was over. But yeah, project wise, it was great. professionally, the mosque was fantastic. We're back on the museum, and if anyone, I think it's okay for me to say, but we are the chosen designers for the Al Ain Museum that is due to begin construction next year, inshallah. So we were selected for that. That's kind of kept us going, which has been great. I know a lot of companies have struggled during the pandemic, so we're extremely fortunate to have loyal clients and clients that recognize our skills. But personally also, I mean, what did I do? I didn't just sit around and do nothing. As you know, I do a lot of art. I sketch a lot. I create a lot. You also are quite a creative yourself. So I really was very introspective personally. I worked on myself mentally, especially in that kind of, the vacuum of being stuck indoors is quite tough.
You sort of have to be your own best company.
You have to be your own best company. I didn't start talking to myself, thank God. I didn't
I'm not gonna lie, there were times that I did. Like, hey man, how you doing? I'm good. How about you?
Have a bit of a castaway kind of.
Wilson.
You have your own Wilson. No, I mean, thank God. I can't imagine going through the pandemic without technology. I mean, Zoom and those video conferencing programs were a real boon for us because you can just call someone.
True.
And if you want to see someone, you can video call them. I mean, it's not the same, but it was nice. But yeah, personally, my own development, I did a lot of things that I put aside that I forgot were important. And then the pandemic hit, which I think a lot of people experienced.
Yeah.
A lot of people started caring more about their health. A lot of people, not just physical, but mental health. I fell in love with drawing again, with sketching and creating again. I made a lot of cool stuff. I'm not the best artist, but I had a lot of fun experimenting. Even I have a project in the works that I'm experimenting with material wise, but it is not new. It's an inspiration from a German, I forget her name, but if you don't mind, I'll Google that. I'll check her name again. She did an experimentation into making wood textile, which I think now people have started making it commercially, but she had done this really interesting experimentation way back when she was in fashion school with wood textile. And I've been doing some experimentation with that myself, which I've been having a lot of fun with.
So when you say wood textile, is it more like a fabric of wood?
Yeah. So it's basically manipulating wood so that it has the properties of the textile, which I think is not new anymore. But for me, was quite interesting. Well, yeah, you see it now a lot. I think there's a product here, actually. We are currently doing our podcast at the Collab, and they have a very interesting material, actually, which is why I've just had the light bulb moment. I was like,
I've realized that whilst we're very thankful to Richard and his team for letting us record at Collab,
yes,
as designers, it tends to become quite distracting.
Yes,
because there's so many awesome samples here that midway conversation, you just realize, oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And then point at that and then point at that and so on. So
I found it. This is 10 years old, but I had gone down the rabbit hole of looking at, because I had seen something and I was like, oh, how did they do that? So I tend to do this. I go down a research rabbit hole of something that I find particularly interesting at the time, kind of hyperfixate on it.
Right.
It's a designer. I'm sorry if I pronounced her name wrong. Elisa Strozik. She was the reason I got so inspired. She made some really amazing, looking at it, I'll show you a little preview of it. Sorry, you guys can't see this video, but I'm just showing Alan a feature on her work. It's looking at it, it looks like fabric, but when you do it up close, it's tiny tiled cuts of wood that are fixed to a fabric surface. And the way she manipulates it and creates things with it is really cool. So yeah, we kind of went on a tangent there, but yeah, that's my current obsession, is that. It's quite cool.
It just goes to show that as architects and designers, you don't necessarily always have to be in and around architecture and interior design. But this is a pretty good segue to what I also want to touch upon, because again, we were talking about it off air. I understand that you have now become sort of a spec queen of your office.
The spec queen is a stretch.
And I myself have recently gotten into sort of spec writing and actually understanding what needs to be in there, and what needs to contractually be there to best support and save people from future mistakes or just negligence of any kind. Of course, those are worst case scenarios, but best case scenario is actually understanding products and knowing what is best suited for what.
Yes.
So again, I'm thinking of that young designer that doesn't know anything about specs, probably is intimidated by a big 500-page document that's slammed down in front of them. How does one go about learning what specs are? And from your experience, what should people be looking for?
Right. Specs are very wide and varied. There's a lot of categories to work with. I mean, for the most part, for architects specifically, interior design is a whole other world of specification. So I won't get into that. It's a lot more detailed and complicated, which I really respect. I've seen the interior design specs for certain projects that we had to, outsource, and they're quite big. For us, it's mainly finishes, even the fenestrations, so windows and doors. And you always have special design items. There's always something. And I learned through doing. It was kind of just what was required at the time. I mean, currently, that's why I'm laughing while you're calling me the spec queen. I'm really not. But I'm the person they usually go to when it comes to doors and windows, because I've had to work that many times on door schedules and window schedules. Right. I was the one having to do all that. So I know the lingo now, all the different terms that the suppliers and manufacturers use. Yeah, I learned through doing. Currently, I'm not doing it. So thank God, because I'm kind of acting in the production and BIM management section of our architecture. So I do not have the time for that. My lovely colleague, Hana, has been doing the coordination. She's a star. She's our design manager for the project. And we've had the opportunity to outsource that for right now. So that's great, because I say the museum is our biggest project to date, so that we've landed. So I'm happy I'm not doing it this time, but I will still have to do the doors and windows. So yeah, that's going to happen next.
No, I think that's an interesting answer, because back at aForm, I'm sort of the stone guy.
You're the stone guy. I don't know how this happens. We just end up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you spec the same thing a couple of times and you suddenly become the expert in it.
Yeah, exactly. if they show a certain supplier or a certain product and you're like, that's not going to work.
Yeah,
I have seen that.
I'm like, yeah, you want to use that stone on indoors? No, I don't think so. That's not going to work.
Oh yeah, I have some stories about things that we spec that have been a nightmare.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I can give you some tips later, because it wouldn't be nice to. I mean, it's not an insult to the suppliers. It's just the products were not used correctly or placed correctly. But yeah, I have some. You learn these things through experience, that some choices are wrong.
No, it's exactly that. It's exactly that. It's again not pointing fingers at anyone. It's just lack of knowledge or lack of experience.
Exactly.
One of the two.
Oh, especially with certain a contractor that doesn't know that material.
Exactly.
You have to be very careful.
Right. Something. This was a conversation we were having in the office the other day. Something as simple as adhesives.
Yes.
Which seems so, blasé and mundane, and who cares what spec the adhesive is? It's, it's adhesive. It just has to stick something onto something else, and that's it. But, suddenly swapping out an adhesive for something else might have a different effect on, the material. It may just contract. It may just, lose adhesion after a year or two.
Yeah.
Pool tiles, for example, was what we were talking about, how they need a different kind of adhesive, and you can't just use run off the mill generic adhesive, which you've maybe used in the entire project and think you can run it into, pool finishes. Doesn't work that way. No, so really something as mundane as that is, of importance.
Yeah. We experienced that when the large format tiles came into the scene, and we got very excited, and then we used them for a private project, and the contractor didn't know what to do with it. And disaster.
But how do I use this?
No, it's kind of like their standard practice for fixing the tiles really doesn't work well with, I'm talking air pockets.
Right.
We were going around bathrooms tapping and hearing hollow noises all over the place.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really, that's actually a point, actually. If you're working with a material that your contractor does not know or have experience in, I highly recommend using a specialized installer. I mean, it will be an extra cost, but it is an investment that will save you a lot of headache later.
Agreed.
Just do it.
Agreed. But there you go. That's Hannah's tip for all of you.
Fight for it. If you don't know the material well and the contractor doesn't know the material well, go with the recommended options.
Awesome. Well, Hana, as we wind down this episode, one of my final questions to you is, now that you are where you are professionally, I know you got a couple of really good projects under your belt. You worked with awesome, designers, collaborators, and so on. What's next for Hana Younes?
Oof, that still remains to be seen. We'll see. I've kind of just been, since the pandemic, I've kind of just been going with what we've got. We've been, as I said, we've been very fortunate with the work that we've gotten during these 2 years. Almost, 2 years, we'd say. What is next? I've got this big project in my lap that I need to work on.
Okay.
But I've been, since learning now and improving with BIM, I've been really intrigued by how useful it is. So I am looking to maybe beef up my experience with that. The ArchiCAD, Graphisoft have been super helpful with learning materials on that. So I've been really considering maybe even specializing in it, because it is the future of construction. I feel a lot the future of construction. We'd only heard like little discussions about it. I think even with the government, there was something was released. I think we discussed this last time. They talked about accepting BIM models as part of submission. I really feel like it has gained traction. It really has gained traction. Before it was kind of like, if you want to. But now even we're getting clients that are asking for the BIM model, which is cool. It's a whole new tool, which I find really interesting. So I'm actually looking into what I can do to that and just the benefits of using it in a project.
Right.
I don't know. That's again, you have to work with others that are willing to work with it also. But I think I feel like it is the future. I mean, there's so many benefits to it. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, I'm learning by doing, but it would be nice to see if there's any kind of specialization I can go into for that.
Definitely. Awesome.
Yes.
And as the absolute most last question, we call this the dinner question.
Oh, okay.
Which is quite self-explanatory, I guess. But the question being that if you had to invite a guest over for dinner, be it, living or not, be it an architect or not, who would you at this moment of time want to have over for dinner and pick their brain about?
Oh, that's interesting.
You can take your time to answer this one.
Yeah, it's a tough question because it really gives people clues into your personality.
No, it is not designed to do that at all.
It is not, is it?
It is not.
It's it can be a bit of a trap, that question. Who would I pick? Again, I'm coming down from submission exhaustion, so
it's fine.
I'm not in the best state to answer this.
I'm going to get myself another coffee, perhaps.
Could you get me one as well? Maybe that will help. It'll help. What do you call it?
Do you want to pause, get another coffee and come back?
Could we?
Absolutely.
And a mull on it and come back?
Absolutely.
Let me think on it.
So we are now back and we have fresh coffees with us. And in that time, I think Hannah's, quick dinner with a guest has more or less become a dinner party at this point.
It's a dinner party.
So Hannah, if you can tell our listeners as your final sort of list of people, who would you want to have over for dinner and why?
I mean, they don't all have to be at the same time, but because I feel like it wouldn't be very interesting. I feel like a one-on-one conversation for each one would be better, but maybe it would be weird.
Yeah. So then let's start. Number one.
So first off, which I think we had this discussion and then I had a light bulb moment, is just have dinner with 10-year-old me and ask her what she thinks of, I'm not going to say my age, of me now, impart advice, I guess. Kind of like a warning, like, don't do that. But I think it would be super interesting, like to just talk to little me before she had all these experiences happen to her.
Right.
And just like, be like, have I fulfilled It would be also a good way to like just stand back and be like, don't take yourself too seriously. Look, your 10-year-old self isn't impressed by you kind of situation, you know? It'd be like, don't take things to heart. Look at 10-year-old you was like, didn't care about these things. Why should you now? I mean, I think it would help kind of a bit.
Okay.
Her impressions on what's
Life
been
in
happening,
general.
on what's happened in your life in these past so many years.
Yeah. Out of all the answers I've had, that's definitely one of the most interesting ones.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a good, as I said, like it's a good thing for your ego. And, you know, when you get older, you start worrying about all these tiny little things. But when you're 10, you didn't have anything to care about, really. Your worries were not serious.
True.
So I feel like it would be just so refreshing.
Absolutely. It would be. I'm kind of thinking what that conversation would be like with myself and 10-year-old me.
Yeah. I feel like my 10-year-old self would not be very impressed with me.
Yeah, same.
She would not be impressed.
Be like, so you didn't become like a jet plane fighter, like we discussed?
You didn't become an archaeologist?
For shame.
I loved Indiana Jones. That's why. It's like, why aren't you an archaeologist? Why are you doing?
Yeah. Like I got confused, archaeologist, walked into the wrong class, and now I'm an architect.
You're not a veterinarian? What? Yeah.
All right. So number 1 was 10-year-old version of yourself. Yes. Number 2?
There's a Irish designer named Eileen Gray. She didn't pioneer it. She basically introduced the whole concept of lacquered furniture to the Western world. She was very much inspired by the whole lacquering process. Sorry, it's very technical again. I'm very technical.
No, but was there...
Because the Eastern world had been lacquering things for God knows how long, hundreds of years, maybe more. And I think she experienced it there and then brought it back and started the whole process and produced these really beautiful pieces of furniture. There's a really wonderful partition, you know, like a decorative divider for space that she made of, I mean, it wouldn't look very impressive now with all of the, you know, innovation that we've come across, but just picturing it at the time when she first put it out into the world, it was very nicely done lacquered panels that intersected.
Okay.
Crisscross on top of each other into a panel.
Right.
And just the idea that was the first time anyone had ever done that, seating and things like that. She kind of, how would you say, who's a good male example that more people would know, who's kind of had his hands in everything? Philip Stark has worked in pretty much anything you could think of in a house, I think.
Right.
And if he hasn't, he's probably working on it now.
Yes.
She's kind of like my Philip Stark, really, because she was doing things with furniture that people hadn't seen before, but not many people know her. And her work, I mean, if you look at it now, isn't super wow, but at the time, it set the standard. Yeah. Yes, it was innovative at the time. And there's a really wonderful exhibit of her work with actual furniture and things that she designed in a museum in Dublin. And I went to go see it and I was very excited. She was actually quite good friends with Corbusier. And there is a letter of correspondence between the two of them.
Oh,
they were quite close. Not in that way. Not in that way. They were quite good friends. They were acquaintances, I think.
Okay.
So there. Awesome. If anyone's ever just like, I know it's a topic that people always talk about, women in design, but it was quite nice to see a woman doing her own thing and succeeding so well, because you have Charles and Ray, but they always connect both Ray and Charles together. Yeah. You know, it's always together. And in that time period, there wasn't many.
Yeah. And even all the stuff that they did, I mean, you're being generous by saying it was Charles and Ray.
Yes.
Most of their stuff, I mean, the Eames chair, for example, is always just the Eames chair. The
Eames.
Yeah, it's never anything else. So yeah.
Which is no shade. I mean, they were such a power couple in design and they've made so many amazing things, but it's nice to see a woman not connected to a man from that time period.
Right.
I know she's not as well known for most people. You'd have to be really into design to know Eileen Gray.
Right.
But it was really nice. I mean, we have architects now, such as Miss Zaha. May she rest in peace, and many other new and upcoming fantastic designers that are gaining traction and getting attention. So I'm very happy with that. But it's just in that time period, she was holding her own. I was like, I really respect that. I respect the hustle.
It's not the most easiest of things to do.
No.
Our field is quite challenging to be successful in to start off, generally speaking.
Yes.
And within that, if you want to be very true to your vision and what you want to do, makes it even harder.
Yes.
And to kind of be on the bleeding edge of things and have people not fully appreciate you in your time is even harder. So it's like triple the level of hardness
it is,
as compared to anyone else.
I don't know, people will be listening to this and be like, oh, it's the woman in design discussion again. We've done it over and over and over and over. But there's still, we've made so much progress and I'm really happy with that. But there's still that expectation. I mean, we had this discussion with my coworkers where the hiring, the balance of genders in, maybe it's not such a concern here, but in certain Western countries, the hiring level, the amount of women versus men in the office, the hiring quotient, the proportion is done specifically because there's the expectation that a lot of the women will leave the industry because they're going to get married and they're going to have kids. And they're usually the one that drops out of work still, which I mean, that's a woman's choice. And some women still like that traditional role and that's not a problem, but it's still an aspect in hiring.
It's still a consideration.
It's still a consideration. It's like, we're going to have to hire more women and men now, because in the future, it'll balance out. We'll hire more women now because a certain percentage will leave to start families. And then in, say, maybe 5 years, the proportion will be 50-50 with that calculation.
Right. I never thought of it that way. Just now.
And I didn't realize that. And I was like, you're right, actually. Like this does happen. And I mean, total respect to that because it's a whole other job.
It is a reality.
It's a reality of life.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
It's going to happen.
All right. Are there any more guests at this dinner party?
Oh, yeah. Again, not all at the same time because I don't know if they would get on. But Frida Kahlo, I love her.
Okay. And here's where I should raise my hand and say, I must plead ignorance. I have no idea who this person is.
Yes.
So for me, who is...
You'd love her. She's very colorful. I think also because of during the pandemic and being stuck indoors, not to the same situation as her at all. And I'm not saying I'm like Frida Kahlo. Her skills are amazing. She is a Latin American artist, I think specifically from Mexico. She made some amazing, you could say like she painted her dreams and her, I won't say hallucinations, but they were when you look at them, it's like, what is this? Like, was she hallucinating when she made these? She was in a horrible accident at a young age and she was bedridden because of the time.
Yeah.
They didn't have the medical abilities to, fix her injuries. So she had back problems for the remainder of her life, like debilitating back and leg problems. She walked with a limp. And at one point she was bedbound for a long time. And some of her weirdest art is what she painted during that time while bedbound. And I'm sure if you see any of her work, you'll see it and you're like, oh, I know that piece. I've seen it before.
Okay.
And she's done some really cool stuff. But it was kind of like, I really admired that during her adversity and just, she's bedbound. She can't do anything. Her life is on pause, basically. She just was like, no, I'm going to keep creating. I'm going to keep painting. And she was kind of a bit of a rebel herself. And I just really love her work and I kind of love her attitude to life. So it would be quite cool to like have not just a dinner session, but like a painting session with her. I think that would be fun.
Interesting.
She might like my work, but I just think it would be fun to like just see her process in person if she was alive. That'd be quite cool.
Awesome. That is quite a dinner party, I must say.
It's maybe not the most interesting for some and very female dominated, but
again, I don't want to kind of, rehash things that have been said already, but there's many schools of thought to it. There's, female led firms that believe that we should hire only women.
I don't think that's correct.
In order to kind of, let me put that out there. Large scale of things, balance things out.
Yeah.
Then there are some who, maybe want to maintain a 50-50, but for, XYZ reasons choose not to.
Yes.
And then there are some that, are purely male dominated.
Yes. I should put that out there. Your hiring should not be based on gender. Your hiring should be based purely as if they have no gender and their abilities. I don't like going into that area where the people are like, oh, we need to hire her because we need diversity. Yeah. No, you should hire her because she's amazing at her job.
Absolutely.
And she will bring so much to your firm.
Right.
That's why. Sorry.
No, but that's exactly it. For me personally, it would just always be something that I would second guess.
Yes.
Am I here because I was just a tick on a box?
Yeah. Were you a diversity hire?
Like that's all that was needed. Or, it could be an age thing. It could be a ethnicity thing. It could be, so many things, but that shouldn't be anything that people need to hire for, if that makes sense.
And it's a bit of a touchy subject.
Absolutely.
And I know people kind of have this knee-jerk reaction to overcompensate.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, we're only hiring women this season because of all these, people are up in arms. No, you should just hire people because they're good, not because of their gender.
Absolutely.
And also, I think it's something here regionally as well. Nationality-based hiring also, it should not be a thing.
Yeah.
It really should not.
Again, I think that the only thing I can say about this topic is I would like to be the change that I would like to see in the world.
Yeah.
Said by a wise old man.
A wise old man.
But that's exactly it. I know that there's very little influence that I can probably have at this point of time in hiring, not just in my firm, but hiring in general.
Yes.
And if there ever does come a point where I can be of influence, best believe that this is what I would sort of take in as ethos, saying that it doesn't matter.
Yes.
None of that matters.
It shouldn't.
But yeah, that got a bit too righteous of me.
It got a bit too... We don't want... that's the thing. I'm trying to avoid this being like a TED Talk or something like that. Yeah. Where it's just like... Yeah.
Which it is not. And I think this might be a good point for me to maybe talk to the listeners and tell you guys that clearly there is so much more that we need to speak to Hana about.
Oh gosh.
But I think that this would be a good point to
if you give me a topic that I'm excited about, I will talk for hours and you guys can use it as a sleep aid if you want.
Yeah. Well, I mean, likewise with me. So I guess that if we both find one, that's going to be a long episode. Mm-hmm. So
we'll do an ASMR set.
That too.
Start whispering. Yeah.
So on that note, Hana, on behalf of, the aForm team, we would like to thank you very much for coming on again.
Yes.
You were one of the first guests that actually believed in what we were doing. Actually, not one of the first. You were the first. You were the first that actually I reached out to and said, this is what we're doing. And you had no hesitance and you showed up.
Yes.
One of our best performing episodes actually to date.
Really? Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm glad.
So
I think I listened to my episode once and that was enough for me. I was like, it was too weird listening to myself. I really dislike it.
Yeah, I don't listen to myself either anymore.
You mute every time you talk when you're listening, when you're doing the edits.
Yeah. So, but yeah, man, I mean, like it's been a good catch up since we last spoke. Mm-hmm. I think that both of us have changed or matured, evolved, adapted, whatever you want to call it. I would like
to hope so.
As both professional designers, but also personally, I think that we're both in different spaces as we were when we last spoke, which is quite interesting. And I look forward to catching up with you again for sure.
Yeah, please.
And
I'm not as nervous as I was the last time.
I promise it won't be another 2-3 years later. Yeah. We will definitely do one.
Even if it's not on the podcast, that would be nice. Awesome. We'll do some design. Awesome. We'll obsess over something and just talk about it. Absolutely. And on that note, for the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week. Bye.
Fellow aFormers, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for being part of our journey, and thank you for the immense support we've been receiving for our episodes. It has and continues to be a very bumpy road, but we wouldn't want it any other way. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought you value, please share this episode with anyone who may benefit from it. But of course, if you loved the episode, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, send us a little DM, and we may just send you a secret link to a secret episode which we've been working on. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. See you next time. Keep sketching.